was your teacher?
Okay, so what we're looking at today, guys, is industrialization. And we're moving into modernity, so we're moving away from agrarian, right? All since last semester, we've been talking about civilization looking for food, right? And then sitting down and then producing food, right? And when they produced too much food, people could what?
Focus on jobs.
Different jobs, specialize. And we're going to see, because of so much agricultural productivity, people are going to be able to specialize in other things beyond agriculture. So our first thing on our study guide says, what is industrialization, right? Question 1. And industrialization is this. It is a change in how goods were produced. Because prior to this, we know everything at this time in industrialization, it's in a factory, right? Well, where were things being made prior to that? In homes. So if you needed clothes, people were making it at home, right? Was it cloth? No, what was it? Wool. Do y'all like wool? No. It's itchy. And so prior to this, what it was called, it's called the cottage industry, or what our book refers to it is called the proto-industry. And so what proto-industry means is that a businessman was taking all the resources to make a shirt. So what would I need to make a shirt? Wool, string. If I had cloth, or if I spun it, right? Maybe some buttons, right? And so what they were doing is they were taking this to some homes. And here's a home right here. I'm going to use these 3 lovely ladies. Okay? One person would spin the cotton. She's going to spin the cotton. And then she's going to make the shirt. And then she's going to sew on the buttons and sew on the tags and sew on the bows or whatever to make it glitzy and glamorous. Okay? If I were asking her to make a whole entire shirt, would her speed be fast or slow? Slow. But in the proto-industry, I'm dividing up the labor, right? Can they produce it faster? Mm-hmm. But that's going to cost a lot of time, and they're going to the countryside. But now, with the new industrial revolution, what's going to happen, instead of them doing in their home, they're going to say, come to the factory. And now they're having a machine assist them. So what happens to their speed? So what happens to production? So then what happens to price? Goes down. So we like industrialization. We like machines. Because when machines start producing something, production goes up and price goes which way? Down. So the Industrial Revolution is going to have a positive impact that prices will go down. And it's going to take place in the 1700s and the 1800s. It's going to shift from us being an agrarian society where everything was made in the home, cottage industry, or proto-industrial industry, to being made in a factory. So do we need people to work in these factories? Okay, I want you to think about all those farmers. Have they lost jobs? Yes, because the machines have put them out of work. So where are most of our people? Are they in the rural areas or the city areas that need jobs? In the rural areas. So where are they going to move the factories?
To the rural area.
That's why if you look on I-35 in Waxahachie, do we have some factories on I-35? We have steel, we have the Pacific paper place, we have that place that makes the pink stuff that goes in the roof. What is it called? Insulation. Gosh darn it. I've been talking baby talk for so long, so my vernacular has been very limited. So,
We're not your babies?
huh?
We're not your babies?
Yes. Okay, so we're going to realize that, do y'all now realize why those factories that were in Waxahachie? You think Waxahachie would just be a rural area, why is there a factory here? Well, it's looking at all the displaced farmers because they need jobs, and are they desperate?
Yes.
So can we pay them lower wages?
Yes.
And so that's why a lot of factories, if you ever look at rural areas and you see all these factories, you're like, have you ever been down 287 to 45 and you see all those packing plants there? You're like, why are they there? Why aren't they in the middle of a city? Well, is it cheaper for them to be out in Ennis?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. That land's cheaper. They probably got concessions from the businesses. And do they have desperate people wanting to work for them? Because they didn't been displaced from the agricultural society because of machinery. So do y'all now understand why factories are located in rural areas? Okay, so let's look at the next thing. So changes that are going to happen is that we're going to see Europe is going to be our first place for industrialization. we're going to see that because of industrialization, urbanization will occur. So like I think about Waxahachie, is Waxahachie kind of urban now? Yes, because those factories, when they moved here, did other things come to meet those workers' needs? We got stores, right? And so that's the urbanization that happened to Waxahachie when factories move out here. We see that they also look for where resources are. So coal, y'all probably learned this in chemistry, it's a fossil fuel, meaning that it's been compressed from fossils, right? So we need to find areas rich in this, and it just so happens that England is very rich in this, and we're looking for iron and timber. Timber used to be the first thing we used, right? But what eventually happened to all that timber? It got cut down, deforestation, so they needed to look at coal. We're going to see that our first factories were located around rivers because they were water powered. Okay? And then we are going to see improved agricultural technology cause what to happen to farmers? They lost their job, and so industries locate where? Rural areas. And then we're going to see legal protection, and the accumulation of wealth is what happens to allow for industrialization to occur. It's going to start in England. England creates the manufacturer system. It creates the factory. So are its engineers very important? Do you think they want their engineers to leave their nation?
No.
Why not? Why wouldn't they want their engineers just to go, like, I'm moving to Australia?
Because they want a monopoly on the
Oh, they keep all that info, right? And what could they do in Australia?
Raise up prices.
Do the same thing, build a new factory, which causes competition, which causes what to happen to prices?
It's the same thing as
Go down. When you have two people competing, prices go down. So does England want to have its engineers leave its country?
No.
So it puts restriction on those engineers that they cannot leave for vacation. They cannot talk to foreigners. And eventually one guy, his name is Samuel Slater, he will cross-dress to America. Why do you think he has to cross-dress? So they don't...
He's fabulous.
He's fabulous, he's snazzy in his attire, but he could leave, and then he could come to America and build what? And so this is how eventually Russia, Japan, and the United States get industrialization, because of cross-dressing engineers that are trying to flee England to be able to come to the Americas or come to another nation and be able to sell their knowledge to build a factory. Okay? So that's how other nations get it, in a weird cross-dressing kind of way. But England's facing, before they get their engineers to leave, it's facing competition from one nation that makes calicos. India. Why do people like calicos? Well, besides it being a nice, lovable cat that has beautiful colors on it, calicos, this is where the name that cat comes from. Calico fabric is very bright and colorful. Like a calico cat, right? A calico cat has all these beautiful colors on it, okay? And usually they're the nicer of the cats, okay? But calicos, y'all had this on question 5, define calicos. Do y'all have colorful cloth, right? What about this cloth? What else? It's inexpensive. What would y'all rather wear, cloth or wool? Okay, have you ever seen the saris of any Indian girls before? And they're very light and breezy. They're very soft. People wanted these calicos. But does England want anybody there buying those calicos? No, because what does it do to their textiles? It lowers their price, and because the demand goes down. And so this is why in question 6, the Calico Acts prevent people bringing in that stuff to England. Okay? So do y'all get why England isn't like India right now? Okay, so how does Russia, Japan, and the United States get industrialization? Engineers coming over, and they also have the resources too. So the way that these factories come about is they have to have these 4 things for industrialization to happen. Land. They have to, and that land is anything that comes from nature. So for a textile factory, what did they need to be able to make textiles, clothes? What natural resource from the ground? Cotton. So they needed to have cotton. Let's look at the next thing. Do they need labor?
Yes.
Okay, so what type of labor do you think these industries are going to be dependent on?
Out of work farmers.
Out of work farmers, people who have heartbeats, right? Could we use kids here?
Yes.
Okay, the next thing, capital. What capital is anything man-made to be able to do an activity, to produce an item. So for example, WISD says they're going to employ me. What am I here? Land, labor, capital, or entrepreneur? I'm labor. What in this room is capital so that I could be able to perform this activity? Projector is capital. What else is capital? Okay, the desk, the books, the floor, the building, right? That's capital. Okay, I want you to think about these industrial factories. What would be capital in here? The machines, right? The building itself. Hey, we don't have lights back then, okay? But eventually we'll get lights, will be part of the capital. Okay, the last thing is an entrepreneur who puts this all together, okay? So if I were to look at Henry Ford, he is the entrepreneur, right? What was the thing that he produced?
The assembly line.
Cars. He produced cars, not the assembly line. That's his idea of how to speed it up. He produces cars. So what land stuff does he need to produce his cars? Iron, steel. What else?
Place to build his.
Oh, factory, coal to heat up the machines. Does he need rubber?
Yes.
Does he need leather?
Yes.
Does he need cloth?
Yes.
Does he need glass?
Yes.
That's all the land. What is the labor? The workers. What's the capital?
The assembly line.
The factory, the machines, the assembly line that moves, right? Okay, so do y'all get the 4 factors of production? It is when these things come together that we can actually have a business. So the factory system is going to integrate those 4 factors of production. It's going to be concentrated in an area. We always see that they're major cities, right? Eventually, when the factory moves to an area, does that area become a major city? Yes. Waxahachie used to be all rural, but once they started moving those factories, what is going to happen to Waxahachie's population? Go up, because yes, it's taking displaced rural workers, but other workers from the city are going to move here. And we're going to see we get increased in specialized labor. The machines are going to basically put away the artisans that were making those things. And we're going to see the first industry is the textile. Do y'all know what textile means? Clothes. It's a fancy word for clothes, okay? And we're going to see the textile industry is going to use the assembly line production. So question 20 on your study guide, a lot of y'all had weird things on here. How did the division of labor differ in the factory system? Prior to it being in the factory system, was everybody always working on the same thing? It was who working on it? One person, an artisan. So that's how it was prior, right? So now how is it different in the factory system? What am I doing with it? Dividing it up. So does everybody know how to make a full entire shirt? No, they only know how to do the one little task. So that's what y'all need to put on 20. We're dividing up the labor into smaller portions. So if we were to make a car today, I need to start with the chassis, right? And then someone would specialize in the chassis, the bottom of the car. And then someone would put on the frame of the car, right? And then someone would put the doors on. And what's the next thing I could put onto the car?
Windows.
The seats, and then windows, and then what else? Tires. Okay, that's the next thing. Someone, and everybody would specialize in one little thing, but did those people know how to make a whole entire car?
No.
And that's what's the difference with this. In the Industrial Revolution, you only know how to do a specific job. Prior to this, did a person who knew how to make a car know how to make the whole entire thing?
Yes.
Yes. Even when I was over here with this small shirt company, they probably could be able to transfer to other people's positions and be able to do it. Okay? When you're an artisan, you know how to do the whole thing. But now you're a factory worker, do you know how to do the whole thing? No. Okay, do y'all understand the division of labor to make one good?
If you did know how to make the whole thing, would you get special treatment, like somehow?
No.
Okay.
What happens is when the factory system gets created, let's just say you're the skilled car artisan,
Oh.
okay? You're making the car. you're Chrysler. Chrysler and Dodge were two different organizations that can make a car from the ground up. But once the factory system's created, are their cars going to be too expensive? Yes, because the factory is going to be able to produce way more cars. And so the artisan, is he revered or is he obsolete? Obsolete. So we're going to see new forms of energy. I've already talked about fossil fuels. That will replace what? What did they deplete?
Wood.
Timber. We're going to see new machines come in, such as the steam engine. We're going to see interchangeable parts, and y'all talked about this 8th grade with Eli Whitney. Y'all know he did the cotton gin. But his other invention with the gun, which creating interchangeable parts, that if one part of your gun messed up, you could just go get another part, replace it, and you have it. That idea will transfer to the factory system where they're going to be able to replace parts of their machines that go crazy. So like your car. If your carburetor goes out, do you have to throw away your whole car? No, you just go get a new carburetor, put it in, and bam, you're ready to go. If your battery goes out, do you have to throw away your whole car? No, you just go get a new battery, right? And this is interchangeable. It's really hard for me just to talk in regular words today. Yesterday was awful. Okay, so we're going to see some people who created things that are going to lead to further industrialization. We have James Watt, who basically created the steam engine, but that steam engine is not going to be so profitable. It takes time, and when they put it to a train, is the train going to move very fast? No, it only moves like 4 miles per hour, so are people going to use the train? So what are we still going to rely on to move items? Now, we don't have cars yet. Horses, but that's moving faster. What have we been talking about? You had to draw in the oceans. Boats. We're still going to use ships. Gosh.
I think we're going to use airplanes.
Okay. Henry Bessemer, he creates the process of purifying iron ore to make steel. And it's to get all those impurities out. And then steel becomes so strong and so cheap that iron is no longer going to be used. Okay. We're going to see Alfred Nobel. You should probably know this guy's name.
Yeah.
Nobel Peace Prize.
Okay, prior to 1860, we did not have the creation of dynamite. And so next year, if you have me for APUS, when we realize that we're building the Transcontinental Railroad and we get to the Rocky Mountains, they have no way to get through the Rocky Mountains besides picking at it. And so they don't have the invention yet. It isn't until the Civil War that dynamite's created. And the funny thing about this is dynamite is going to be used to destroy. And if you know about the Nobel Peace Prize, right? It's irony, right? And it's because of what happens with this, because he was trying to make a medicine to cure ailments.
He was trying to make a medicine and he did that?
Doesn't that happen in chemistry, that you put two opposing chemicals together, then it explodes?
Yeah.
And so,
It does cure the element, but it does come with death.
okay, so a couple of things. I know the person, whoever's going to watch this on the other side, is going to hear all our hoopla.
Hey, Griffin.
People that are on this, Volta creates the battery. So if you ever think about batteries and volts, that's where it comes from. Vertiday creates the electric motor, but it's not efficient at this time, so we're still relying on steam and then the sails and the winds. Thomas Edison, y'all know with the light bulb, but we also know electricity. He discovered the single current. But there's another guy we should have on this that's actually the current we use. You'll probably know his name. Tesla. Nikola Tesla created the Nikolai. Okay? He created the alternating current, and it's the alternating current is what uses and powers most of our buildings today. And he should be on here, but our book didn't have him. Eventually, this will transfer to cables carrying electricity, but at this time, do you think most people could afford electricity in their homes? No, so it isn't until like about the 1950s that electricity are in most homes. So people are still depending on coal. So we got to talk about a couple of things. How do these businesses form? First thing is the forming of the corporation, because no single man was wealthy enough to be able to front a business on his own. And so what he's going to do is he's going to form a corporation that people could not trust yet. They could buy stocks. Oh, and so y'all probably know of a company that we've been talking about called a joint stock company, right? And the reason why joint stock companies and stocks form is that there used to be this law called the law of primogeniture. I want you to raise your hand if you're the firstborn son. In society at this time, firstborn son or daughter, that's fine. Raise your hand if you're the firstborn son or daughter. Okay, if you're the firstborn son or daughter, you got to inherit your parents' wealth. So raise your hand if, oh, so I hear some disgruntledness. Raise your hand if there's second and third or fourthborn or fifthborn or sixthborn sons in here. Guess what? Did you inherit anything?
No.
And so it is these people that got really upset saying, well, I'm not inheriting my parents' wealth. And what they would do is they would take their money and invest in a company through a joint stock to make money. And so they didn't have enough money to buy a whole business, but they had enough money to invest in a corporation that could possibly get them profit. And by investing in these things, like they invested in the sailing business, right? We've seen those before, that these joint stock companies went to and colonize to find gold and silver, and they made money. Well, now that that is over, these second and third born sons are looking at corporations as a way to invest. They're going to become investors. Okay, so let me talk about some formations of businesses. One of them is a monopoly, and you should probably know this guy's name, Associated. Okay, Rockefeller Center. Eventually, when you get into U.S., I will talk about how they become philanthropists. Okay, but in this portion, what we're going to talk about is how did he come in and amass so much wealth? First off, his business is going to be called Standard Oil. So what do you think he's producing? Oil. But you typically think of what type of oil first? Gasoline, but he wasn't doing gasoline first. He was doing kerosene. Do y'all know what kerosene is? The lamps. Thank you, Grayson. It's for lamps. But people, prior to this, what were they using prior to kerosene? Whale oil. And then prior to that, they were using candles. Okay? So are people kind of scared of using kerosene in their homes? Because it's flammable. And so this is the reason why he calls his company Standard. So it seems safe. And so eventually, what makes his kerosene oil obsolete? Electricity. And so then when electricity comes out, he is going to shift his business into what? Gasoline. And so that's how he transfers. The reason why kerosene, what you have to do for kerosene is a white oil. So you're going to have to heat it up to get all those impurities out. For gasoline, do you have to do that? No. So when electricity comes out, he gets rid of the refineries and has to do a little bit more to refine it, but not as much as he was doing with kerosene. He's going to own 95% of the oil industry. So let's talk about why that he's y'all say, well, that's not fully a monopoly, but does he control the price? Yes. Yes. And so the way he was able to do this is he's like Walmart. So let me explain what Walmart does. Walmart comes into small communities. And what do they do with prices? They lower them. And so what happens to the mom and pop grocery stores? They go out of business. That's exactly what Rockefeller did. Rockefeller would come into an area, he would set his prices low. So what did his competitors have to do? Set theirs low, and they eventually went out of what? Business, and then he would buy theirs up. And he would go city by city and do this.
Is that illegal now?
Yes, and eventually when I get to U.S. history, I keep on talking about this, eventually next year, I'm going to talk about the Sherman Antitrust and the Clayton Antitrust Act that prevent anybody from doing this. Okay? So next year, sorry, you just hear about it this year and just tantalizing info.
You're saying I still gerrymander.
Okay. Cartels. Okay, some of you may think, I know of cartels like the Sinaloa cartel. Let me explain what a cartel is, and let me do it in a modern day one, not the drug cartel, but I'll explain it in a second. OPEC. Have you ever heard of OPEC? Oil, petroleum exporting countries. Where do you think most of these oil, petroleum exporting countries are? Middle East. There's some in North Africa. Saudi Arabia is outside of the Middle East in that area, right? I go all the way to Iran. Okay. Colombia and Venezuela. Okay, so let me talk about this. Prior to the 1950s, the United States was the #1 producer of oil. But then, what do we do with most of our resources?
Squander them.
We squandered them and we sold them. Gas was very cheap back then. And so we basically depleted our resources in America. So in the 1960s, did we have to look at other places to get oil?
Yeah.
And so this is why oil petroleum countries came together, because they realized if we're competing against each other to sell this oil, what happens to the price? It goes down. Do they want to do that?
No.
So they formed a cartel. And what happens is this cartel comes together. It's all these different groups of people coming together to make one product. What do the oil petroleum exporting countries produce?
Oil.
And they're going to limit the supply. If they limit the supply, what happens to the price? It goes up. So this keeps prices high. They absorb competitors. If there's a new nation that starts producing oil, are they going to make them come into their cartel?
Yes.
Because if they were outside their cartel, that's going to create what? Competition, and it's going to do what with price? And so they're going to fix prices and divide the market. So this is what the Sinaloa cartel does. They specialize in what? Drugs. We don't know what kind of drugs because we don't do them good.
You
Okay?
don't know what you're
And so do they try to limit their supply?
Yes.
Yes, so that they could keep prices high. Do they have competitors? And so what do they try to do with their competitors?
Scare them into joining them.
Scare them either to join them, or they have turf wars, violence, right?
And they absorb them.
Okay, and then they absorb them, which lets them fix price and divide a market up. Okay, so do y'all understand why we call them drug cartels? Because they act in this format. They produce the same product, they try to limit supply, they try to keep prices high, they try to absorb their competitors, so this is why they fight against each other. Okay, and then once they come together, they fix the price and divide a market. That's why it's called a drug cartel. Okay, let's look at transnational businesses. Transnational business, one example here is United Fruit Co. You probably know United Fruit Co. for its bananas. The Chiquita banana, the girl with the cornucopia on her head of fruit. Yeah, I tried to grab a banana today, but apparently I grabbed a Dole banana. It says Del Monte, not Dole. But Chiquita banana is United Fruit Co. Let me explain another transnational business you know, McDonald's. Have you ever been in a foreign country and you're just like, I just want American food, and you see a McDonald's and you're like, yes.
But
It's not American.
It's not American because they have stuff that's native to their area that they put in there. But I could be in Paris and I could get a burger, I could get a Big Mac. I could be in Spain and I could get a Big Mac. I could go, my husband I asked him because he's been in Singapore, and he's like, you get a Big Mac in Singapore, you get a Big Mac in Australia.
not India.
Hey, not India because of meat issues.
They respect their cows.
Yeah, they respect their cows, so it's sacrilegious. Alright, do y'all get transnational?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a little bit more that I have to explain, and then we'll be done with just talking about business, and we'll get into society next time. Stock market. Who's investing in the stocks? Investors that are what? Firstborn?
Not the firstborn.
There's second and thirdborn sons that are trying to make money, right? Because of the law of primogeniture. Insurance. Businesses will be getting insurance because what will happen, let me just make, I'm going to talk about insurance and limited liability corps together. Is there someone who wants to create a business? Hey, Grayson, what would you like to create your business in? What are you producing? Just give me an inanimate object that you want to make an image.
Weapons.
Weapons. Okay, so Grayson is gonna make. He wants to make. Okay, no, I actually saw this. There's a guy who, to make really good knives, you have to be like a welder, and so he's gonna be a welder, and he's gonna make knives. He's gonna make really good knives, and it takes a whole process. So he wants to have a business. Okay, and he needs to have insurance because if anybody comes in and steals all his knives, he wants to be able to compensate his investors and his investment. Also, let's just say he needs to be a limited liability organization, because what happens if someone comes in and gets all his knives and they do a mass knife stabbing at an elementary school, and they want to, instead of, they can't go after the guy because he's dead, but they want to go after Grayson because he sold the knives. And so now Grayson's really rethinking this, like, oh my gosh, I could lose my house, I could lose my car, I could lose my dog, I could lose my baseball bats, I could lose I could lose everything. And so now he's thinking this over, but this is when Grayson, when he invents his company, he has to become a limited liability corp. Grayson, let's listen to this, okay? Every one of you, if you ever want to become a business, and I've given him a doomsday, right? Because the guy who went up and did this thing to this elementary school, he's killed himself with the knives that he had from Grayson's place. So now they can't go after him. But who are they trying to go after? So this is why Grayson's company needs to be a limited liability corp. It needs to be a limited liability corp because it's now going to be a business. They cannot go after Grayson. They could just go after, you're researching this stuff, okay? But he creates himself into a corporation that they can only sue that corporation. Can they come after him and his house and his car and his baseball hat and his dog and his cat? No. So he will be safe, but they go after the corporation. And so when people get upset with businesses like McDonald's, and let's just say McDonald's made nuggets that were cancerous and people were eating them, they would go after McDonald's versus the person who created the company, right?
We run it through Ronald McDonald.
Okay. Yeah, he's dead. But okay, do y'all get this? Do y'all learn a lesson? If you're gonna create a business, what do you need to do? Incorporate yourself so they can't sue you. Okay. Gold standard, this last thing is most of our money that was produced at this time, remember in China, everything had to be in silver, right?
Yes.
But they also created paper money and they realized, was that worth much?
Nah.
So many other countries realized they don't want people walking around with their gold, right? Because that's going to be heavy on your pants and your pants are going to be falling down. Huge fashion faux pas. And so what they're going to do is they're going to create dollar bills, but that dollar bill is going to be backed by gold. That's called the gold standard. And so you could used to be able to take up your dollar bills to the bank and get it in gold, but did you want to do that? No, because your pants would be heavy and you would have to be lugging around this gold. So people got paper dollars. And so it's all the way up into the 1970s that our dollar is backed in gold. We will be taking off the gold standard in the 70s.
The U.S.?
Yeah, nearly every nation is starting to get off the gold standard by that time. The U.S. gets off by 1970, and we have a money that's called fiat. It has value because the government says it has value. Okay?
I like it.
Okay. Are we good with financial institutions?
Wait.
Do y'all understand how we started forming these businesses? And it was really dependent on what happened to farmers.
They lost the farm.
They lost their farms because of technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where did our factories move?
Rulers.
Okay. What resources do they need?
Coal.
Coal, land,
Timber.
labor, capital, entrepreneurs, right? And then we started to see, what did they need for these businesses to form? They had all that stuff, but they also needed what? Laborers, but what do they need from the second and third and fourth born sons?
Stop.
Investments. Okay, so this is why we talked about all of this.